Today's episode of the Effective Ecommerce podcast, we're going to be talking about guerrilla marketing. What is guerrilla marketing? How to implement guerrilla marketing, and why it's probably really important to your online business. Even though you think that internet marketing and online business and all this whole world should only take place in the computer, I'm going to disagree, and you'll understand why in just a minute here. So really, what is guerrilla marketing before we get into it? To me, and there's different definitions depending on who you ask, to me it's just thinking outside of the box, doing something outside of the ordinary, doing something that people haven't thought about. And we'll give a few different examples. One example I recently gave to someone, and this was for an app, it's not for an online business, but it was an app where you could it was basically a Craigslist style app where you can borrow or trade or sell, not borrow, you could trade or sell things on using this app. So what I told them you should do is have a scavenger hunt where people need to use your app, and they would go through, and the first listing would be something like, meet me to trade a handshake for a gold coin. Not a real gold coin, whatever, a silver, a metal coin. And then the next thing would be take that metal coin, go to another person and trade that for a key. Then you got to take the key and go to another person and trade that. So what it would be doing is it would be making people use the app, but they'd be interacting in real life, and it's totally different. It's totally random. There's a ton of other examples of guerrilla marketing, but first, I want to talk about why guerrilla marketing is so powerful. And to do that, I want to tell a little story. So first off, most of you guys have probably heard the story of David versus Goliath. And it's overplayed. And if you haven't yet read Malcolm Gladwell's book, David and Goliath, I highly recommend it. I'm going to be repeating some of the stuff he said. And Malcolm Gladwell does a much better job of explaining this than I do. So you see David and Goliath, and you think to yourself, man, David is obviously outmatched. He's going to lose this battle, but he had a trick up his sleeve. He wasn't going to fight a conventional battle because everyone's saying David, this small little boy, and Goliath, this giant monstrous human being, and thinking they're going to fight in hand-to-hand combat, thinking that they're going to fight, with their swords in person at close range. And David would have lost that every single day. But David didn't want to do that. What he did is he slung a rock from far away and hit Goliath in the head. So why did David win? Well, he won because he didn't play by the rules. He did something outside of what was supposed to be done. And in this book, Malcolm Gladwell's book, he talks about it. If you look at throughout the history of the most important battles where an army 10 times, one side of the army had, or one side of the battle had an army that was 10 times bigger than the other side. So an example might be one side had 10,000 soldiers, the other side had 100,000 soldiers or more. And if you look at that, not surprisingly, 90% of the time, I forget the exact numbers, 90% of the time, the army with the more people won 90% of the time. But that's the interesting part, that 10% of the time, why did the other side win? And it turns out, if you look at these kind of battles, which are way outmatched battles, and you look at these two different armies and say, okay, well, what if we only look at people where guerrilla warfare was fought, where people did unconventional warfare, and what happens? 60% of the time, the smaller army wins. So this would mean, basically, if the United States and Canada got into war and they were fighting. Canada, I think, has a population of close to a little over 30 million. United States has 300 million. And so these two countries are battling it out. But Canada decides, we're going to fight this war unconventionally. We're going to fight a guerrilla warfare style. Chances are Canada would win. That might not be quite as accurate now because the U.S. has gotten pretty good at their guerrilla warfare tactics, whatever, all that political stuff. But you look at Vietnam and the war for Vietnam, and I don't want to get too political here. Vietnam had a much smaller, much less experienced army, but what they did have was guerrilla warfare. They did not fight fair. And I'm doing this long story to let you know, you should not fight fair. There's no reason you should fight fair. One last example, just while I'm on this tangent. You look at the Civil War, and what would they do? The American Civil War or any war in the 1700s, they'd line up across from each other and shoot guns at each other in very organized fashion. That's crazy. What part of the reason I think American Revolution worked so well is we didn't only do that, we also introduced snipers and did some other stuff like that. So This isn't supposed to be a history lesson. My point is there are incumbents in your space. There's people that are bigger than you in your space, and you shouldn't fight them fair. You should do things outside of the box. And they know that you're going to be doing internet marketing. They know you're going to be doing AdWords, Facebook ads. They know you're going to be doing social media, and there's ways to turn a Guerrilla aspect to all the different social medias, but you should be doing things outside of the box. And I can give you examples, but I can't come up with an idea for you, because if I could, then it's not that outside of the box. So here's some different ideas. The scavenger hunt one, like I said, but basically just getting in front of people. So for performance nut butter, one guerrilla marketing tactic I'm going to do is just going to conventions where I know people are going to be there that would buy my product and handing out samples. That's a very low risk, easy guerrilla marketing tactic. Another thing I might do is run the Spartan race or the mud race or one of those different ones. Get a team of people together and we'll all put giant basically helmets on or giant hats on that have like giant nuts, like a macadamia, coconut, and cashew. So people look at it like, what the hell are they doing? And as we run the race, we could hand out samples. That would create a memory. That'd be very memorable. My friend who owns Barnana, which is a banana snack item, one thing he did is for a convention, he hired a bunch of breakdancers to wear gorilla suits and breakdance and hand out samples. That's out of the ordinary. That's memorable. So you need to think of things like this. You need to think of things that are out of the ordinary. One last example is there was some show, I don't remember exactly, some kind of cartoon that was on Cartoon Network. And what they did is they hid a bunch of, there's like blinking robots or something to do with that in the show. They hid a bunch of these all over the place. And what ended up happening was they got bomb scares, actually, and it got on the news, and so it got a bunch of free publicity. Actually, I probably have some other ones I'll think about too. There was a book, I can't remember the name, The Tucker Max, and it ended up coming out and being a movie as well. So Tucker Max, which if you're not familiar with him, he is a very, what's the right word here? He's very loud. He's very much, he tells stories about how he gets drunk and does different things and, has sexual encounters and all kinds of different things. And feminists absolutely hate him. So what they did for the launch is they got a bunch of basically billboards. They took out a bunch of billboards, and if I'm remembering this correctly, they actually spray painted over the billboards themselves and got a whole cause, and they emailed a bunch of feminists and saying, we need to boycott this movie and we need to make a big deal about this. So they instigated these riots, not really riots, but they instigated this protest. That's a better word, actually. Instigated this protest against the movie because they knew that then it was going to get on the news. Then it was going to get some publicity. So this episode's a lot shorter, and I'm sure I could do a better job of explaining guerrilla marketing. But the truth is, I want you just to start thinking outside of the box. I want you to start thinking of things. How can I get the word out there? And Spotlight Marketing, if you remember from an earlier podcast episode, if you didn't listen to that one yet, definitely go back and check it out. But Spotlight Marketing came about from me thinking outside of the box and thinking, what can I do in a fashion? How can I get in front of people? How can I get in front of my customers? So start thinking about that. Hopefully this episode helps. As always, leave that 5-star review on iTunes for a chance to win a free one-on-one consulting session. Go to effectiveecommerce.com to get your success pack. And we got new episodes every Monday and Thursday. Thank you for listening to this episode, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.